You put that down.
I just love it. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I hate it for Clemson that they lost. If you're an ACC fan, that's the last thing you wanted to see happen. The Fighting Irish to beat them. Because Fighting Irish all of a sudden decides, hey, buddy, this year we're going to play for the title. And then you go beat Clemson. I have a hard time with that.
They banged up. I didn't realize how many guys Clemson had out on defense. They were banged up.
See, these are things you got to know before we make the picks, Tom.
Well, Clemson was still a 6-point favorite.
That's what I'm saying.
I know, and that's why I thought it was disrespectful.
Yeah.
I mean, the Fighting Irish showed they couldn't stop nobody because Clemson scored on them with a backup quarterback.
So that's a pretty doggone good backup quarterback.
Yeah, he is. He is. I agree.
If you think about
He'd be starting anywhere else. You're right.
If you think about it, he'd starting anywhere else right now, probably last year too. Not only that, that doesn't surprise me because when we talk about
playing safety at Carolina.
When we talk about these quarterbacks, these backups at Clemson, Alabama, and all these Power Fives, like the guys that usually make the playoffs, it's never rebuild. It's always reload.
Yeah,
it's just next man up. He's always ready.
There's a kid at Alabama,
Mac Jones.
Yeah, I mean last year. Oh man, I mean you got a big drop off. He's coming in for 2. He's tearing it up this year.
Yeah, he's having the Joe Burrow type year.
Yeah. So. You got to remember these major college football programs. It's like they get 10 number 1 draft picks every year. So
some of them do. Yeah. Some of them do. Especially if you're the Alabamas and the Clemsons, you get the 5-star recruits, and everybody else in your own conference, maybe not.
Tiger Birdie's 15 with 3 to go. Now at -5. Lead is still at 9 as far as I know right now.
Yeah, it's at 9.
Okay.
So doesn't like it. No.
The new rankings: Alabama 1, Notre Dame 2, Ohio State 3, Clemson 4, A&M 5, Florida 6, and Cincinnati 7, BYU 8. Hunter, you had a problem there, didn't you?
Yeah. I got a big problem. You got 7 and 8 with Cincinnati and BYU. Last week, they were ranked 6th and 7th. So what happens? I get Georgia lost, so Florida should move up. I get that. And Georgia should fall back. And we knew Clemson would probably only fall back to 4th because that's their first loss on the season. It was to
first regular season loss since 2007.
With a backup quarterback.
Exactly. I mean, so we knew they weren't going to fall far. But Cincinnati and BYU won. I don't like it when undefeateds that are that high and all you're asking them to do, because that's what the committee wants you to do. You got to win to get in. That's been college football's motto for years. You go undefeated, we'll give you an opportunity, maybe. And that's they're doing what they're being asked, which is to win, and they fall back a spot. Both of them fall back a spot. No. Florida should be behind both BYU and Cincinnati with the 1 loss, and especially Texas A&M should be back there as well. Yeah, Florida's only loss is to Texas A&M, but Texas A&M's only loss is to Alabama. And then we go back and forth. How I like to say, in college, they always talk about you have good losses and bad losses. A good loss would be, well, you're favored to lose against this team. Guess what? You probably you lost. You were supposed to. Or you're Georgia playing Florida last week. You're favored, and you don't win that game. That's a bad loss. So for me, I hate that the Power 5, and don't get me wrong, I love watching SEC football, ACC football, Big Ten football more than anybody. But they're just showing no respect to what BYU and Cincinnati are putting on the field. None. None.
Cincinnati's been just destroying people.
They've put 55 up last night on ECU.
Yeah, but you're playing East Carolina.
East Carolina's not very
And that's what they'll all say. But at the same time, I can't help if I'm the powerhouse of my conference and everybody else cupcakes. You could make the same argument for Clemson these past few years. What'd they put, 70 up on Georgia Tech this year? Was that really a ball game?
What's going to hurt them is they don't have, usually Cincinnati will get a pretty high-profile non-conference game. Like they played Ohio State one year. They don't get a chance to get like a high-profile SEC or ACC. No,
because they got to play their conference.
They got to play their conference, so that's going to hurt them this year.
And I'm with you 100%. I'm the same way. I think Cincinnati, I don't know about BYU. BYU got to show me a little bit more. But Cincinnati, to me, and it's kind of hard for me to watch coaches get on there and go, oh, they wouldn't be in your top 4. How do you know? You cannot sit here and tell me they couldn't compete with a Clemson, Notre Dame, Alabama, or whoever.
And what's their definition of compete? I mean, did they think Georgia Tech was really competing against Clemson when it was 60-something to 20?
Yeah.
70 something like 20. What's their definition of compete? Just because they might not only win the game or be within 3 points to a touchdown doesn't mean they didn't compete. If Cincinnati was to go out there and play, let's say Clemson, full strength Clemson right now, and were to get beat by 20, is that not something we would have expected anyways? But they competed, and say the score was 40-20. Clemson still let them score 3 touchdowns.
Yeah,
so they were good enough.
I think the ACC got what they wanted for Fighting Irish to win, because then that bumps them up there. So you don't think Clemson's going to fall out because Trevor Lawrence is going to be back. They're going to roll through and win the ACC next time they do play. And then you're not going to fall Fighting Irish too far back because they lost to Clemson. That's what's going to happen here, and you're going to have 2 teams from the ACC that are going to make it now instead of 2 from the SEC.
Maybe. Notre Dame, I'd have to look at what they have on the remaining schedule. If they lose the second one, or they lose the first one, I think they're done.
Carolina's hopes for them making it was for the Fighting Irish to get beat, because Carolina still got Notre Dame and Miami in front of them to play.
Yes.
That's what they were hoping, and it's just the Fighting Irish.
I don't think North Carolina was going to. I didn't think they were going to get into the ACC championship game. I thought they had a good opportunity since they were taking the top 2 this year. But with those losses, obviously
they can't get in.
Not anymore, unless like Notre Dame was to fall apart, and then somebody with 2 losses would have to get in. But then North Carolina couldn't afford to lose another one. So I don't think they're making an ACC championship game. The rest of the season is just to play hard and to try and win out. For me, though, in the ACC, it's what's going to be so bad, Terry, is I don't know if they will take 2 ACC teams, because you got to watch what the Pac-12 does. Because think about it, you got one loss Notre Dame and 1 loss Clemson. If Clemson beats Notre Dame in the ACC championship game, you might also have a 1-loss team that wins the Big 12. So do you take technically the second place person from the ACC, or do you take the 1-loss conference champion from the Big 12? This is where things get a little dicey about, where they split. And I feel like everything is against Notre Dame.
I don't think no conference is getting 2 in. I just don't think that's going to happen this year. I mean, I just think.
Well, Tom, you've heard me about what your conference is. I don't even think none of y'all should make it, but hey.
So Ohio State shouldn't make it. No, they're terrible.
You went from playing 8 games this year. Now you're only playing 7.
It's not our fault. It's not our fault that Maryland doesn't know how to wear masks and wash their hands.
It's not your fault that your conference couldn't even decide if they wanted to play this time or not. If you guys were going to stick to it and play in the springtime, you wouldn't even be in consideration for college football.
And that's the only reason y'all jumped back in it. The Big Ten was only kind of everybody else started playing. Y'all was like, "Oh no, we messed up. Let's get back in this because we're not going to be able to play for a championship."
Maybe we were trying to be cautious and not help spread the pandemic.
Well, the Pac-12 is looking the same way too. I don't think anybody from the Pac-12 should make it. Seriously, the Pac-12 has already canceled 4 different games for this weekend.
Well, the thing is, y'all may not know, but if you don't play at least 6 games, you can't even make the Big Ten championship game. So somebody might screw them and say, "Oh, well, we're not going to play them," so they can't make it. So. I just don't think.
See, and it just comes back to my argument when it first came out that you guys were starting up, but only playing. I would respect it more if you would have started a little bit closer when everybody else did, and were playing at least 10 games. But there's a big drop between you playing now only 7 games, and the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 teams playing 11 to 10 games.
There's a big difference.
That's a big difference. It's the same conversation we were having when we didn't think the Cardinals were going to be able to make up their games.
Well, that's what I was having last week when Boise State's playing a team. They've played 7, and and the other team is playing ain't played but 2. There's a huge difference in daggum on field.
You're going to have to take exception in this year. This is an unusual situation.
Should I, though?
This isn't every
Should
year.
I?
He's so silly.
This isn't every year. This is a 1-year deal.
This is a 1-year deal, so I think you can miss it for 1 year and give Cincinnati the spot.
Give Cincinnati the spot. Well,
you still get a team from Ohio?
I don't think Cincinnati's going to make it either, but I do think.
Why should they not, Tom? They're unbeaten.
I think Tom would like to see them.
I wouldn't mind. I mean, if they make it, it's fine, especially if they get in front of Notre Dame. That's fine with me. That Notre Dame is a joke, and just only 1 year they're going to play in the conference. How do you do that? I'm going to play in the conference 1 year, then I'm back out. That's a bunch of crap.
I think BYU's in the same spot. They're in the same spot we always say about Notre Dame. You're undefeated, but you're an independent right now. If you were part of a conference, you might be getting more looks of possibly moving up in the ranking.
It's going to help Notre Dame this year. They get to play. They're playing in the championship game. They're not going to beat Clemson again. We know if Clemson gets healthy, Clemson's going to beat them soundly in that ACC championship.
The ACC gives money to little sisters of the poor, and Tom hates on them. So.
Yeah,
poor Irish up there in Indiana.
The poor Irish
South Bend,
hoard
Indiana.
their money. Everybody knows. Everybody knows Notre Dame's hoarding their money. So.
All right, let's make some more bad picks. How about that?
Yes.
Real quick, let me go down the rankings.
Think about these a little bit more this week.
Well, maybe
if
you're not sure, Hunter, you shouldn't say it as confident.
No, you cannot waver. You can't waver in the pick game. Right. You can't.
Well,
you have to just be set in stone.
We got to 8. Miami's 9. Indiana cracks the top 10. Oregon 11. Georgia to 12. Wisconsin 13. Oklahoma State 14. The Fancy Chickens of Coastal Carolina are 15. Marshall 16. Iowa State 17. Oklahoma 18. SMU 19. USC 20. Texas 21. Liberty 22. Northwestern 23. Auburn 24. And Louisiana Raging Cajuns are back in at 25.
Cajun.
North Carolina's at 26 in both polls, one spot out. Appalachian is 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 30, 35. And then Terry, should App be ranked ahead of Carolina? App's their only loss is to Marshall, who's 16th. Carolina's both their losses are to two unranked teams who aren't doing too well. None of Carolina's victories are, quote, impressive. App beat them on the field last time they played. Should Appalachian not be ranked higher than the North Carolina
Well, I always
Tar
like
Heels?
it when you give me them questions.
I know. I'm going to get a good answer,
yeah,
I think.
Because Appalachian should be ahead of Carolina.
Right.
Exactly. That's how it should be.
Right.
And I don't like Carolina anyway. So, I mean, I can make it simple.
Simple enough.
I
could have guessed what that
Tom,
was
what do you think? Being in all his seriousness, did I lay out a good
Impartially.
case for why Appalachian should not be be ranked ahead of?
I think Appalachian should. I think Carolina's a little shaky on defense sometimes. And,
Everybody's shaky on defense this year.
They're not consistent. It's like the Florida State game. Mm-hmm. The first half they look like a bunch of bums. The second half they almost came back and won that game. So they're just not real consistent. And Appalachian State has only lost one game to a ranked opponent. So the case closed that Appalachian should be ranked ahead of Carolina.
Now, so no matter how bad your picks are, those both opinions will be quoted in next week's picks.
Right.
For talking about Appalachian.
Bad
good
takes.
job.
Well,
I got him
just
to say
be
one good
careful.
thing.
You know,
Bad
we
takes.
was talking about last week, and don't get me wrong, I did take Virginia Tech, and then the coach blew the game, and they lost, and Liberty wins. You know, North Carolina State got Liberty next week. So.
Yeah.
Well, Terry, since you brought up Virginia Tech and blowing it, I'll let you start.